The scene shifted to the commander's office at the Combat Command Center, where Zhu Zhang was currently on the phone with Zhang Yi. Learning of Zhang Yi's departure to Tianhai City to meet his companions, Zhu Zhang reluctantly agreed to this request. However, he must go and come back quickly. With the arrival of the Samsara team, they have to start their next round of combat operations immediately. And it's without question that this operation cannot be done without Zhang Yi. Zhu Zhang ended the call, and as his attention shifted back to Deng Yuanbua, who was leisurely drinking his cup of tea, Zhu Zhang, with a satisfied demeanor, stated casually, "Mr. Deng, now that everyone is here, we can start implementing our plan. Do you have any questions?" Deng Yuanbua placed down his cup of tea, and with a serious expression, he asked Zhu Zhang if he had decided on the candidate. Zhu Zhang frowned slightly. Zhang Yi is a very good candidate, but he is unwilling to take on the responsibilities of the captain. His ability is very important for this operation, but I am more optimistic about his ability to block the opponent's prophetic ability, rather than his combat power. The captain can be replaced by someone else. In terms of command alone, Bailey Chongqing might be more suitable. Deng Yuanbua simply smiled and added that unfortunately, Bailey Chongqing's current combat power is at least a deputy captain's level. And although there is a gap compared with the 6 captains, it is only below them and obviously not enough to convince anyone of Bailey Chongqing taking the captain's mantle. It's also not an option to give all the command power to Gao Chongkong. After all, I know you can't give such a great power to one person. But this operation, we, the residents of Blizzard City, can no longer accept another failure. If we lose again, you should know how serious the consequences will be. Zhu Zhang's expression became cold and serious. If he fails to eclipse Moon again, he, the commander of the Jiangnan region, will have to resign no matter what. But with their best candidate for the commander's position being super dead, do they really want Gao Chongkong to hold such a huge power and position? Fuck no. Deng Yuanbua slowly pointed a finger in Zhu Zhang's direction and continued. In my opinion, Zhang Yi is the best candidate. You mentioned that he refused the captain's position. But wasn't it because the price you offered was not high enough to impress him? Zhu Zhang frowned and retorted, calmly stating that he promised Zhang Yi an official status as a captain of an investigation team, and all the benefits of an A-level material supply treatment of Blizzard City. In addition to that was the exchange rights of the weapons warehouse, which were basically open to him. These are already considered as a very high treatment. If it weren't for the extraordinary period they're in, he wouldn't even have had such a good opportunity. Deng Yuanbua shook his head slightly and smiled brightly at what he just heard. Zhu Zhang, he stated, "It seems you were truly just a soldier back then and have no idea how to do business. Real business is what I excel at, and it seems I have to say a few words in this regard. In business, it is important to take what you need. If you want Zhang Yi to agree to your conditions, you must first meet his requirements." Obviously, Zhu Zhang was clueless about this matter. What do you mean by agree to his conditions? How could he know what Zhang Yi's requirements are? And at present, it seems that Zhang Yi doesn't even need anything urgently. Deng Yuanbua laughed slightly and calmly took a sip of his tea. At this point, there's no doubt that Zhu Zhang would fumble the bag if given another chance. If this matter is difficult for you to handle, why not let me do it? Zhu Zhang couldn't believe his ears. When did Deng Yuanbua become so generous? As Deng Yuanbua held his chin deviously, a meaningful realization flashed across his narrowed eyes. He asked Zhu Zhang to promise him one thing if he succeeds in convincing Zhang Yi to be the captain of the newly formed investigation team. Hearing this, Zhu Zhang was surprised. He knew this old guy really wouldn't do good things for nothing. Zhu Zhang frowned slightly and calmly asked what the request was. Deng Yuanbua replied leisurely, "I want Zhang Yi to lead the next operation to encircle and suppress Eclipse Moon. Not only that, but also to spread his reputation." Zhang Yi and the Deng family had no connection, so obviously, Deng Yuanbua wasn't doing this for Zhang Yi's sake. However, one might wonder what the real reason behind this sudden request. Fortunately, Zhu Zhang instantly guessed Deng Yuanbua's purpose and questioned knowingly, "Are you worried that Gao Chongkong will gain too much prestige in Blizzard City because of this matter, thus affecting your Deng family?" Deng Yuanbua smiled, took another sip of his tea and didn't answer Zhu Zhang's question directly. "Zhu Zhang, I don't think you want your subordinates to be too successful to be a threat to the master. So this is a necessary precaution, right?" Zhu Zhang was in a dilemma, but no matter how you look at it, Gao Chongkong was more suitable than Zhang Yi. Although Zhang Yi made a great contribution last time, it was only because of his strong personal strength and good luck to pick up Liao Honglei's loophole. Nonetheless, this request was not an impossible task. Deng Yuanbua smiled and even added that young people may be a little immature in this regard, but they can still provide guidance. We need to let the young people gain more experience. After all, in the end times, what we need most was to quickly train new talents. We need to give young and new people opportunities to develop. Zhu Zhang understood the hidden meaning behind this statement and was not pleased. After all, he wasn't that old. Well, too old if we're being precise. However, I can still consider what you just said. Deng Yuanbuo's smile became even stronger. Well, in that case, I'll go and convince Zhang Yi. Deng Yuanbuo said this as he got up and prepared to bounce. But before leaving, Zhu Zhang suddenly asked behind him how his family was holding up. How was the Deng family doing? Deng Yuanbuo paused on his way out and sighed softly. That incident was a big blow to him, so don't disturb him for the time being. Zhu Zhang nodded slightly and respectfully agreed. Anyway, after the call with Zhu Zhang, Zhang Yi took Liang Yu and Flower to the subway station as the three traveled back to the shelter. No one knew about their return. So when Chunlei saw Zhang Yi, he screamed and rushed over to hug his thigh. "Boss, why were you gone for so long this time? I was worried all day when you were not at home." Zhang Yi couldn't help rolling his eyes at Chunlei's cowardly behavior. "You are still as timid as ever. Nothing happened in Tianhai City, so what were you afraid of?" Chunlei wiped his tears, looking a bit aggrieved as he got up. Although nothing happened in Tianhai City, the mushroom explosion that occurred was really scary. He even pointed in the direction of Jiangning City. Although it was hundreds of kilometers away, the impact of the god of death of love could be felt in Tianhai City. Zhang Yi had instructed Yang Xinxin not to tell the others about Eclipse Moon. But the explosion could never be hidden. "Don't worry," he said lightly. "Everything was under control, including the release of the god of death of love." Zhang Yi glanced around and asked where everyone was. What were they doing? Chunlei blinked and explained that Uncle Yu has been practicing boxing on the third underground floor recently, stating that his current exercise might help him achieve a breakthrough in his abilities. Lu Karen was probably at her workplace at this time. Zhou Qir and Yang Xinxin are in the infirmary, and no one knows what they've been doing. The rest are in their rooms. Zhang Yi nodded slightly and headed for the infirmary. "Okay, I'll go see them." The main purpose of coming back this time was to give those compounds to Zhou Qir and Lu Karen for research. He couldn't stay for long, and he had to go back to Blizzard City the next day. And for a long time to come, he would be busy with the matter of destroying Eclipse Moon. Zhang Yi went straight to the infirmary. But the moment he reached for the door, he heard a splashing sound of water. Zhang Yi suddenly became curious and didn't know exactly what Zhou Qir was doing. What's going on? There seemed to be so much water? Could it be that she was practicing swimming? Zhang Yi immediately entered after a knock on the door. "Qir, are you there?" As if frightened by Zhang Yi, there was a sound of something breaking inside. Zhang Yi took a couple steps forward, but what he saw shocked him greatly. Yang Xinxin was tied tightly to a chair, soaking wet, and her cute little face, as big as a palm, was as pale as a dead person. Zhang Yi just stood there, momentarily stunned. He didn't understand what was happening as Zhou Qir rushed to Yang Xinxin's side and activated her ability to resuscitate her once again. Her eyes were full of worry, but also a hint of expectation. The 37th experiment, is it finally going to succeed? But at that very moment, Yang Xinxin's eyes, which looked almost lifeless, suddenly rolled down. And the moment she saw Zhang Yi, a light suddenly burst out from her dim eyes and a sick smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Anyway, just when Zhang Yi seems to be piecing what's happening together, he suddenly saw an extremely strange scene. Above Yang Xinxin's lying figure, an angel with 6 white wings, holding a sacred bow and arrow slowly emerged. And with it was a burst of holy light which illuminated the entire room. It was so bright that Zhou Qir found it difficult to open her eyes. Yang Xinxin, however, was immersed in this light as she blushes profusely, her sick smile replaced by a radiant one. "Big brother, you are finally back." Xinxin's experiment was successful. "Now, I am also a mutant." After what seems like forever, Zhang Yi finally figured out everything. Although Yang Xinxin saved her life with Zhou Qir's help and successfully awakened her superpowers, the repeated tortures over the past few days have brought her mental and physical state to the extreme. So she immediately passed out. And with that, the angel-like figure slowly dissipated as well. Zhang Yi slowly approached them and asked Zhou Qir what was going on. Zhou Qir immediately loosened the restraints and quietly narrated what happened. After a long period of research, we finally found that awakening superpowers is strongly related to people's obsession. When awakening, the stronger the obsession of a person is, the more powerful the power obtained after awakening is likely to be. Lust, hatred, jealousy, greed, all these emotions and more will become the power of awakening. Yang Xinxin rejected the Ice Soul back then because she hoped to get a stronger and purer power. And the way to obtain this power was to constantly experience death, to squeeze out one's own potential, and to refine the mind in one's heart to the extreme. Zhang Yi nodded slightly, understanding the situation. If he didn't know Yang Xinxin all too well, He really would have thought she was a crazy girl. Who, in their right mind, would use this method to awaken superpowers after being offered an easier way to do so? Zhang Yi had died once before, so he knows how uncomfortable the entire experience was. But just thinking about the 37 death experiences would make anyone shudder. Zhou Qier stared at her cousin with mixed feelings in her heart. She was willing to endlessly jump back and forth on the edge of life and death in order to obtain powerful superpowers. So what kind of superpower did Yang Xinxin awaken? After all, the way she awakened was daunting just by looking at it. Although Zhou Qier was quite happy with the results, she still felt a little distressed for Yang Xinxin. Zhang Yi, on the other hand, rushed over for a closer look. He also couldn't help but wonder what kind of superpower Yang Xinxin had awakened. If she somehow managed to couple her top-notch brain with a strong fighting ability, wouldn't she be quite unstoppable? Anyway, Zhang Yi was afraid of disturbing her peaceful sleep any further, so he called Zhou Qier aside. "Here, let's go find Lu Karen first. There is something I need you two to help me research on." Zhou Qier nodded slightly without any fuss, and shortly after, the two came to Lu Karen's studio. Seeing Zhang Yi, Lu Karen was delighted. "Brother, you're back. Didn't you participate in the mission to encircle and suppress Eclipse Moon? Are you injured?" She thought of the explosion that shocked all the neighboring cities, and hurried over. Zhang Yi saw her worried look and replied that he was fine. Nothing serious happened to him. Despite her brilliant mind, Lu Karen was the only person whose thought process was very simple, so Zhang Yi didn't need to worry too much when communicating with her. After not seeing each other for a while, the little girl seemed to have grown up a little. Lu Karen patted her chest and spoke excitedly. "That's great, but what about the recent events in Blizzard City? Has Eclipse Moon been completely eliminated?" Zhang Yi smiled and replied that they'll talk about that matter later, but he needs to show them a few things first. He then took out the several medicines he had exchanged from his alternate space and showed them to the two. The compounds were in the form of pills, so they can just scrape off a little bit and study them slowly. With Lu Karen's ability, she can analyze the composition of the materials, and with Zhou Qier's knowledge about medicine, she can also analyze the efficacy and side effects of the drugs. Zhang Yi was optimistic, although he doesn't expect them to be able to replicate the drugs. After all, it is much more difficult to create these sort of things than weapons. But if Zhou Qier and Lu Karen can really do it, it would be the best. If they can't, it doesn't matter. The important thing was giving it a try. In that way, Zhang Yi can quickly improve the strength of his family, especially Uncle Yu and Chunlei if the results prove to be successful. Zhou Qier took the medicine and curiously asked what kind of medicine they were. Zhang Yi thought for a brief moment and stated calmly, "It's a very expensive medicine. I spent a huge amount of points to exchange them from Blizzard City." He touched his chin and continued, "It is said to be a genetic medicine. They have different effects that can enhance the strength of superpowers and even increase the probability of superpower awakening." Zhou Qier and Lu Karen's eyes lit up when they heard this. There's actually such a good thing. As expected of the Jiangnan region, it's amazing. Zhou Qier frowned slightly as she thought of something. Apparently, the development of these kinds of medicines were very complicated. Without professional equipment and materials, it would be difficult to replicate it. Lu Karen pursed his lips and added, "My ability can combine molecular components, and the need for instruments and equipment is not that high. However, even if the composition structure is known, the process of refining the medicine is not clear. This is also difficult to do." Zhang Yi was prepared, so he was not disappointed. "I may face a big battle very soon, so please help me take a look at its specific effects and side effects so that I can have an idea. As for whether it can be replicated, you should try it more in the future. Do your best. If you can't, then there's nothing that can be done." Zhang Yi has never been a person who makes excessive demands. Zhou Qier immediately stated that she'll go back to the infirmary later and scrape off a little powder which will be enough for the research. Zhang Yi nodded slightly, quite satisfied. "Okay, but there's no rush for this matter. According to the information currently obtained by the Jiangnan region, the Eclipse group suffered heavy losses and has disappeared. So it's likely that they're recuperating in secret or recruiting helpers. Anyway, let's go eat first. When Xinxin wakes up, I will tell you what has happened recently." 2 hours later, Zhou Haimei and Yang Min finally prepared a large table of food. And Yang Xinxin also woke up under Zhou Qier's care. Yang Xinxin sat down next to Zhang Yi, hugged his arm intimately, and looked up at him with a smile. "Big brother, Xinxin can now help you in the future." Zhang Yi was curious about Yang Xinxin's ability, and reached out to scratch her pink nose. "You have always been my best helper." Yang Xinxin chuckled and replied that the situation back then was different. Now, she doesn't need to hide in the shelter all the time. She can follow Zhang Yi and fight with him like Liang Yu and Flower. Zhang Yi suddenly became curious. Logically speaking, The way Yang Xinshin obtained her superpowers was very terrifying. She went through a full 37 cycles of death. But in terms of the degree of cruelty, it is hard to say that it was more severe than his own. After all, Zhang Yi was hacked to death, so the resentment in his heart accumulated to the deepest level and awakened his superpowers. And although Yang Xinshin experienced the feeling of death many times, she subconsciously understood that this was just an experiment, and Zhou here would save her at the critical moment. He leaned close to Yang Xinshin's ear, and the warm breath in his mouth was exhaled beside her crystal-clear earlobe. What exactly is your special ability? You can tell, big brother. Yang Xinshin's face and neck turned red, and she raised her head like a little temptress. Big brother, do you want to try it? Zhang Yi was stunned. Let me try? In other words, it is not an ability of pure attack attribute. Yang Xinshin smiled playfully and gently reassured Zhang Yi. Don't worry, I'm not going to use my ability on my big brother. At this point, Zhang Yi looked and felt strange. Seriously, what kind of ability is it? Yang Xinshin didn't keep Zhang Yi in suspense any longer and calmly explained. My ability is named Angel of Desire, which basically allows me to manipulate people's hearts. Love, hatred, anger, joy, all these emotions and more. As long as a person is shot by the angel's arrow, they will have such feelings from the bottom of their hearts. Then, they can be completely controlled by these emotions. Yang Xinshin held her face with both hands. Her face flushed morbidly. What a wonderful ability it is to be able to play with people's hearts at will. Good lord. Zhang Yi couldn't help swallowing his saliva. The ability to play with people's hearts really fits the heart of this Yandere girl. He suddenly became alert as numerous thoughts boggled his mind. What if this girl took the opportunity to sneak attack him and made him fall in love with someone or hate someone? It would be miserable, although he understood that Yang Xinshin would not hurt him. But in the eyes of this Yandere girl, good and bad things naturally have different definitions. So he immediately diverted his attention and served Yang Xinshin with some lovely dish, and even told her to eat something. This sudden gesture was a little bit forced, so the situation became a little bit awkward. Zhang Yi then continued to ask indirectly, inquiring about the characteristics of Yang Xinshin's ability. Yang Xinshin did not hide anything from Zhang Yi, and told him everything about her known abilities. After listening, Zhang Yi fell into silence for a while, because the abilities obtained through such a terrifying way have extremely high upper and lower limits. If it falls into the hands of an ordinary person, this ability is quite useless, and might be even considered as playing with fire if you are not careful. But once used properly, it can create incredible effects at the right time. Sure enough, it fits Yang Xinshin's character. Anyway, the warm scene of a family crowded around a round table and eating lively made Zhang Yi feel very relaxed. Although he left for Blizzard City not long ago, he had experienced so many things that he had the illusion that he had not been with everyone for a long time. During the meal, the topic soon turned to the Eclipse group. Obviously, everyone was very concerned about that foreign organization. After thinking for a moment, Zhang Yi planned to tell everyone the truth about the matter. In any case, everyone must be mentally prepared, because he couldn't guarantee that they wouldn't appear in Tianhai City. Zhang Yi calmly told them about Eclipse Moon's situation, about the fact that the Jiangnan district headquarters failed in the encirclement and suppression operation. As soon as this was said, everyone's expressions were filled with surprise and worry. What? Chunlei looked incredulous. Even the people in Blizzard City failed? Didn't they send out an investigation team? At least it's the same level as the Black Robe team back then, right? Plus, there are more than a dozen mutants from other cities like you, boss. So how come the 13 guardians of the Jiangnan region, after basically using all the forces they can mobilize, still lose? Zhang Yi took a deep breath and shook his head helplessly as he continued. I didn't expect it either. And not just me, but probably no one could have expected this outcome. Not only did they lose, but they also lost miserably. The God team was almost wiped out, and their captain Deng Shintong also died in battle. Liang Yu interjected at this moment, and added that if it weren't for Zhang Yi suddenly coming out and killing 4 members of Eclipse Moon, then the battle would have been a complete and utter defeat. Hearing this, Uncle Yu found it hard to accept. He held his forehead with one hand, his expression extremely painful. Those damn little neons, are they really that strong? Zhang Yi frowned slightly. At first, he too was unwilling to accept this, but the facts were before his eyes, and he couldn't just refuse to accept them. At this moment, Yang Xinshin suddenly stated that she smells a conspiracy in this matter. The dinner table suddenly became eerie quiet because everyone had abruptly stopped what they were doing when Yang Xinshin dropped her bombshell statement. Zhang Yi turned his head and looked at Yang Xinshin next to him. Conspiracy? What kind of conspiracy could there be in this matter? Yang Xinshin wiped her mouth with a napkin and explained in a calm tone. Big brother, I have only seen Bien Junwar with the combat power of a captain, and he was seriously injured and dying. Do you think a captain is easy to kill? Zhang Yi shook his head vehemently. That's a cruel joke to even think about. If I don't know his ability or make adequate preparations ahead of time, it will be difficult for me to kill him even with my current abilities. Intelligence is extremely important in the battle between mutants. Suddenly, Zhang Yi thought of something. You mean the other party can't kill Deng Shintong and the other members of the Heavenly God team so easily without knowing their abilities? Yang Xinxin glanced at him and smiled knowingly. At worst, the members of this God team will be able to escape, right? It's impossible that most of them would be swiftly and efficiently killed by the Eclipse group, leaving no room for escape. Zhang Yi thought of Deng Shintong's ability to manipulate light, which was one of the best abilities for concealing attacks and escaping. If a captain is determined to escape, it will be absolutely difficult to kill him unless the other party is a mutant of an Epsilon level. Then, the next obvious question would be about the other party having a mutant of the Epsilon level. According to the feedback from Zhu Zhang and the others, it is obviously not the case. If there really was such a person, Eclipse Moon would have completely flattened the entire Neon Islands first, before clashing with their country. But our intelligence reveals that the Eclipse group couldn't directly confront the Kanto boss in the Azuma organization. However, Zhang Yi murmured, there is a mutant with the ability of prophecy among them. Through this ability, it shouldn't be difficult to predict Deng Shintong and his team members' abilities, right? Yang Xinxin tilted her head and smiled slightly. Big brother, if that mutant with the ability of prophecy can really predict the opponent's ability, then I think she must be at the level of Epsilon. Because in the duel between mutants, the influence of the first-hand intelligence on the battle situation exceeds 30%, and even exceeds 50% in group battles. So, if they had such an ability, why didn't they kill Izumo in Kanto? Zhang Yi put down the chopsticks in his hand involuntarily. It was blatantly clear that he hadn't thought about these questions carefully before. However, after hearing her little redhead's analysis, he slowly developed a creepy feeling upon realizing what Yang Xinxin was getting at. Zhang Yi looked at Yang Xinxin and stated in absolute disbelief, "You mean there is a traitor in Blizzard City? I don't really want to believe it." Hearing this, everyone also expressed their disbelief on this matter. Chunlei even thought this analysis makes absolutely no sense. And Uncle Yu strongly believes that most of the people in Blizzard City, being soldiers, would never sell out their country. Zhou Kier asked the obvious follow-up question. After all, as impossible as it may be, if there is indeed a traitor in Blizzard City, then what can they gain from cooperating with this Ronin organization? Again, Yang Xinxin calmly explained, although this matter sounds outrageous, no matter from which angle to analyze, the strength of the Jiangnan region is absolutely superior to the Ronin organization. And it is close to impossible for them to lose in the manner Big Brother described earlier. Therefore, if we analyze it from ordinary logic, we naturally won't think that there is a traitor in Blizzard City. But what if we think about it from another angle? Could it be that someone in Blizzard City deliberately used the Eclipse Moon to deal with the Celestial God Squad? As far as I know, the inside of Blizzard City is not a monolithic entity. These words instantly reminded Zhang Yi. The Deng family has very high prestige and power in Blizzard City. And Deng Shintong was the successor of the Deng family, and rumored that the Deng family intended to promote him to the position of Zhu Zheng's successor. After all, in the end times, life and death are unpredictable, and no one knows how long Zhu Zheng can live. Moreover, it is always necessary to plan ahead and train a group of successors for Lao Zhu. At this moment, Zhang Yi's thoughts in his mind became even more confused. If you think about it from Yang Xinxin's perspective, the situation will be much more terrifying and serious. Because Zhang Yi has no idea how many factions there are in Blizzard City. There is even a possibility that Zhu Zheng himself wants to eradicate Deng Shintong. After all, while he is still sitting in his seat, someone has set his sights on his throne. This kind of power ambiguity is very subtle.